Gracious God, when your son Jesus was born in Bethlehem and grew up in Nazareth, they were very humble beginnings. And yet here we are, the body of Christ, your church, living in this very blessed environment where we have practically all the resources that one could want or dream of. We gather here to reflect on the flow of life, life's journey, and the invitation and call you've put before us to enjoy eternally a heavenly banquet. And yet we know that while we're on this journey, we have an awesome responsibility to share the good news. We've gathered here today to hear at least one wonderful presentation on all the different ways that we can resource that opportunity to be worthy disciples. Please keep our minds and hearts open and inspire our speakers. We have a truly worthy effort this afternoon. We pray this in Jesus' name.
Amen. Okay, welcome everybody to our program today, Onward to Glory. This is our second and third phases. I'm pleased to be here with Christy Steffy from the Catholic Foundation, and the way we're going to do this program, I'm going to speak for maybe 25 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Christy. She's going to have a presentation for you, and we're not going to take questions until the end, until both of us are done, and then we'll have some questions from the floor if you have any. But we think that'll be the best way to get the information out to you. That being said, just a little background on myself. I was born and raised in the Chicago area, went to Xavier University, graduated Xavier in 1968, went immediately to Notre Dame Law School, South Bend, Indiana, where I graduated in 1971. After graduation, I moved back to Chicago, where I practiced for a few years. I moved to Columbus, Ohio in 1973. I practiced there for 3 years. I moved to Lancaster in July of 1976. After practicing by myself for a few years, I had the good fortune of joining together with Jerry Stebleton and Mike Acton. We formed Stebleton, Acton, and Aranda LPA in the little house at 302 East Main Street, which is at the corner of Pearl and Main. And we were there until the early 1990s when we bought the Anchor building together with another party and turned it into a condominium, kind of a commercial condominium. We became the owners of the second floor and a half of the first floor and set our practice up there. And ultimately, down the road a few years, we bought out the third floor owner, and so it came to pass that we owned 2.5 of the 3 stories there. And the firm which succeeded Stebleton, Aranda, or Stebleton, Acton, and Aranda, it became Stebleton, Aranda, and Snyder, and now it's Stebleton Snyder. Since I retired out of that firm due to my advanced age, my youthful 68 years back in June of 14 required that I retire from the firm at the end of 15. Then I started doing what I'm doing now, which is I have my own practice since January 1 of 2016. Continuing on now, I'm located down at the Ohio Glass Museum building, right in the heart of downtown Lancaster at 124 West Main Street, up on the second floor. It's been a very nice arrangement for me with another lawyer who practices in the same area that I do, with couple of exceptions. So most of my life in the practice of law has been in the business law area, with particular focus on estate planning, and my practice today as a sole practitioner is about 99% that. I have done some adoption work in the past, but I have retired from that practice pretty much at this time. So I'm spending most of my time helping people with their estate planning and trying to assist them in, you might say, the transfer of wealth from one to another. And so when Father called me and asked me to do this program, it was kind of one of those situations where I said, well, sure, as long as you can get 40 or 50 couples. And he assured me that he would, but no. So, just to give you a kind of little overview, today, this is going to be a general program, a general presentation, so not individual to any one of you. It is going to focus on estate planning and transfer of wealth. What is it not going to do? We are not going to spend any considerable time on estate tax, although it will be mentioned. And we're not going to do any extensive discussion of Medicaid planning, although it will be mentioned. Medicaid planning could be a whole day seminar. Certainly not enough time today to get into that, although, as I say, I do that work and I can touch upon it in my remarks. So that being said, let me start off by just saying when I meet with clients in my office, one of my first questions to them is, what are your goals for yourselves, your family? What do you want to see happen with your estate, all the property you've worked hard to accumulate? What do you want to see happen? And so that kind of kicks off our discussion, and it also emphasizes that estate planning is really about planning, about you doing planning. It's not, what is it not about? What it's not about is me telling you what to do. So it does. So what does that mean? It does require some decision making. My job, in major part, is to give you options, give you ideas, and then you can we can discuss those. You can ask questions, and we can then, from those discussions, we can focus in on exactly what you want to happen. So what we're talking about is, in this area, there's two key concepts that if this is all you get from today, from what I say, this will be valuable to you going forward. The first is transfer, and the second is ownership. So when I meet with clients, I try to help them to understand that the legal consequences of one dying have to do with the transfer of property that we own when we die. So that's the key word in that sense, transfer. So if you are sensitive to the fact that when you pass on your property, hard fought, you worked hard for all of this, is going to go somewhere. And you have the ability to control, of course, where that goes. Now, the reason we called this, in part, the choice is yours, is because, in fact, that is true. Where the property goes, to whom it goes, is going to be your choice. So that first key word is transfer. And the second key word to take with you today as you go home is ownership. And let me talk a little bit about what I mean there. So, one of the things I ask folks to do for themselves as much or more than for me is to, after they leave my office, is to just sit down at the computer or with a legal pad or however you like to do this, and just make a list of what you own. Make a list of your assets. So that would be a way of bringing to the forefront of your mind what it is that comprises my estate. And then having that kind of fresh in your mind, what we really hone in on is, how do I own those assets? So I'm going to spend a few minutes with you today talking about how you own your property and helping you to understand that how you own your property will affect transfer, and transfer will in essence occur because of the way that you own your property. And again, to emphasize, the way in which you own your property is something totally within your control. So part of my role is to give you the ideas about why you might want to change the manner in which you own your property, and why would that be? Why would that be important or beneficial? So that's a little bit of what we're going to touch upon today. But when you leave, you're going to think transfer, ownership, how do I own what I have? So, going back to goals that clients have, let's stop for just a minute and think of what happens when a person dies in terms of estate planning and the legal consequences that surround death. Okay, so there's I think three things that will happen in terms of estate planning when one dies. So a person can choose to have no will. In other words, do no estate planning. And if they take that course of action and have no will when they die, you may have heard the expression in your lifetime. You may have heard people say, well, the state of Ohio has made a will for you. And actually that's true. The state of Ohio has made a will for all of us. And if a person chooses to not make their own will, then how will their property transfer? It will transfer because of that will the state of Ohio made for you. Okay? So that's one thing that could happen. The second thing that could happen is that you've made a will. You've made a will. In Ohio, a will that's handwritten on a legal pad is legally effective as long as it is witnessed by two independent people who witness the will and see the testator sign. So no great formality is necessary. Now, whether that's a good will or not, might be questionable, but a person can make a will. So I often say during your lifetime, your will is just a piece of paper. It reflects your intentions and your ideas at that point in time when you signed it. It can be changed, it can be modified, it can be revoked entirely. But at the time of death, that will becomes irrevocable and of course all important. So a person can make a will that also will affect the transfer of property that they own when they die. A third option is that a person will make a will and a trust, and that will provide them with a couple of things. One, avoidance of probate. And number two, some protection of assets from creditors. And depending on the age of the client and his or their children, it can provide for the younger folks a kind of asset management tool, and I'll try to explain that a little bit more what I mean there. So those are the three things, and I'm guessing that because you're here today, you're probably not in category 1, no will, and you might be in category 2 or 3. So what I want to help you with and give you some ideas on is the whole idea of avoiding probate. How we do that and why we do that and why you might want to do it. Why it might be beneficial to you. So there's nothing horrible about probate court. If you, I mean, again, as I said before, these are options. I give people options, ways that they can go, and then they choose. It's not that it'll be horrible to go through probate court. What would happen if your estate went through probate court? And what is probate court? Not every state in America has probate like we have in Ohio. We have what's called supervised probate, which means that the probate judge sees to it that what the person put in their will, that happens. He or she makes sure that happens. And so there's rules and regulations and code provisions and so forth that are all there to protect the decedent who set forth his or her wishes, and the probate judge is there to make sure that those wishes are carried into effect. Now, this is a little sidebar, so it'll be short. You may or may not know that in Fairfield County Probate Court and I'm pretty sure every one of the other 87 counties in Ohio, in the probate court of that county, there are local rules which affect attorney's fees. So, since I'm most familiar with Fairfield County, I can speak to that. So, Judge Vandervoort, who's our probate judge, spent a lot of time in the last 5 years revising the local rules, and so a practitioner today, if he is the lawyer for the estate, when he or she goes to get paid, he has to look at those local rules. And so the point being, the judge is a supervising person over the lawyer and what the lawyer gets paid. So if you had, before coming here today, if you had any conception or idea that probate lawyers got real rich on doing probate estates, that's probably incorrect. It is correct to say that his or her fees are governed by the judge. And so there's a control mechanism there designed to make it fair to all the consumers and the people that have to have access to probate court. So that's part of the reason why if you have to go to probate court, it's not going to be the end of the world. So that might be a good little segue over into, okay, so why do I need to go to probate court? The simplest way to understand this is that if when you die, you have property, using me for an example, if you have property titled James C. Aranda, period, okay, James C. Aranda, period, that property is going to go through probate court, and it is going to transfer to whomever by reason of my will or by the will that the state of Ohio made for you. Okay? So that's what so as I deal with clients, that's the way I tell it to them. If you have what you don't want James C. Aranda period property. You want to own your property in such a way that the transfer occurs by reason of the way that you set it up. And the probate court becomes totally unnecessary and you never go there. And what's the benefit of that? Money. You save money. because you're not in probate court. And secondly, the timing is usually better, quicker. And probate court, there's some time periods that you have to observe and so forth. And sometimes that can make things kind of a little bit more drawn out than if you've given it the planning, resulting in a trust agreement that lays out the distribution plan, and you have no James C. Aranda period property. It's all, and here's the other things that I've spent some time on to help you understand your options. So if we don't want James C. Aranda period property, so how do we want it? And some of these things I'm going to say you're probably familiar with from your life experience to date. But just to repeat, we have in Ohio what's called survivorship. Survivorship property, any kind of property, there's only really two kinds of property: real property, land, and personal property, which is everything else. So both real and personal property can be held in survivorship. That could be a husband and wife. It can be a mother and a daughter. It could be. The real key thing is not who is it. The real key thing is the words that are in the deed that creates the survivorship feature. When we talk about real estate, we have the languages for their joint lives, remainder to the survivor of them. Those words have to be in the deed going from grantor to grantee, and if they are, then that creates a survivorship tenancy. What does that mean? It means if there's two people, just use the common example of husband and wife, for example. When one of the parties dies, the other will automatically own 100% of the property. When I say automatically, on like 1 minute after death, that occurs. And the reason for that is there is never any lapse of title in real estate. So the survivorship deed means that immediately after the moment of death, the surviving party is the 100% owner. And that can be very beneficial in a number of ways. One is you don't have to wait. If you wanted to sell the property, you don't have to wait. You can put it on the market very quickly. So there's survivorship. And you can have survivorship with other kinds of property. For example, bank accounts, joint tenant with right of survivorship. Frequently you see JTWROS, joint tenant with right of survivorship. So if you have a bank account, again, if it's a husband and wife, mother and daughter, mother and son, two friends not married, if it's joint tenant with right of survivorship, when one of those two people dies, the other is the owner of the account, period. That happens automatically by operation of law. So that survivorship can come in very handy as a planning tool. Additionally, we have ownership designations, POD, payable on death. You can have a bank account at your local bank where you do business. You can set up that account to be payable on death to so-and-so. We also now have, with real estate and some other forms of personal property, transfer on death, so TOD. So in summary, we have survivorship, we have payable on death, we have transfer on death. All of these things mean that the asset in question will transfer to whomever you designate without regard to the probate court, actually without regard to your will. Because if you say payable on death to Jenny Smith, then when you die, Jenny Smith's going to get it. It doesn't matter what you could have a will over it, doesn't matter. So those are three examples of ways that how you own your asset affects the transfer. The transfer is going to occur by reason of what you have said. You also, from your experience, know that we have things like life insurance contracts. Life insurance will typically have beneficiary designations, primary and usually contingent. So when you have a beneficiary designation on your life insurance, that person or persons is going to get the money. It's not a matter of what your will says. It's not a matter of going to probate court. That's a contract between you and the life insurance company where you both agree. You're going to pay your premiums during your lifetime. When you die, death benefit proceeds are going to go to the person you've designated. Same thing with your retirement plan. If you have a 401k plan through your employer, for example, you have designated a beneficiary and hopefully a contingent. So with those designations, that also will drive the transfer to those beneficiaries without regard to probate, without regard to your will. And then other similar kinds of assets, for a 401k plan, a IRA, a conventional IRA or a Roth, either one. These plans have designated beneficiaries. So if you put all that together, so you've got survivorship, you've got payable on death, you've got transfer on death, you've got assets. People don't always think about a life insurance policy as an asset, but it is. Assets with designated beneficiaries, retirement plans, IRAs, all of these things where you designate a beneficiary, that directs the transfer to that individual. And all those things I just said are things you can do. But in order to receive the benefit, you have to do it. So what is the benefit? If you do those things as appropriate to your situation, then you will have no Mary Smith period property, no James C. Aranda period property. It'll all be survivorship, payable on death, transfer on death. And because of those designations, you will have no need to go to probate court. Also with a trust, I do many more trusts now than ever before. But what does a trust do to achieve that same effect? By creating a trust, you create the trust and then you fund or you put things into it, assets, property. So that if you started out with James C. Aranda property over here, when we get done, you're going to have James C. Aranda trustee property over here. So what does that mean? No probate. No probate court. It also means that the plan of distribution, this trust agreement over here where all the assets are that you have put in there, is going to have a plan of distribution. It would be similar to what you might have over in a so-called simple will. But in other words, taking a conventional husband and wife with children situation, the trust agreement is going to provide for the surviving spouse of the two spouses. It's going to also provide for the children. I'm talking generally now. This is not a particular plan, but it's going to provide for the children of the husband and wife, and whoever else they want to remember. It's going to have the chance for them to make their charitable provisions and donations in the trust if they want. Dealing with the Christy and the Catholic Foundation, for example, you could have a provision over here in your trust that says that. So the whole plan, everything that you want to have happen, that protects your spouse, I'd have to say that 99.99% of my client experience would be that one of the goals of a husband and wife coming to see me is, well, the plan has to protect the surviving spouse. So there's that. That feature will happen, and then with the children, a lot depends on how old they are. So let me tell you what I mean by that. If if the client has adult children who are well on their way in life, then the trust will basically say after the death of both husband and wife, the trust distributes to the children in equal shares. Just like give them, distribute it, give them the money. If the children are younger, say especially where you have a child that might be under age 18, you're going to probably have some different provisions for the possibility that a child beneficiary would be under age 18 at the time the trust becomes relevant. And you wouldn't necessarily be, in other words, providing for a giving to a 16-year-old or 17-year-old. You'd have more provisions to deal with that. So, but again, so in summary, what does the trust provide? Probate avoidance, asset protection. I'll come back to that just briefly, and then a plan of managing assets for the benefit of your children or grandchildren or both, as the case may be. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there with respect to the, especially since I've been talking for 25 minutes already.
Don't get any ideas that I'm going to start using that for my comments.
Before I turn it over to Christy, let me just finish off by talking about three documents that I think everybody should have. These are what I call the healthcare documents, to distinguish them, you might say, from estate planning documents. So, we have a durable power of attorney, and I'll come back and be very brief on these, but durable power of attorney, we have a healthcare power of attorney, they're different, and we have a living will declaration. A durable power of attorney is your financial document. In short, what it does, it permits, like if I give Carol, if I make her my agent in my durable power of attorney, she can do business for me. She can conduct financial transactions, real estate transactions, and a number of things that are all listed in the document. And then I can also have a backup as a safety gap if I wanted an alternate agent behind Carol, say, for example, my son Michael. Suppose I make him an alternate agent. So that's what that does. And it's kind of like preventive medicine. You might not need it, but if you need it and you don't have it, you could have trouble and expense. Healthcare power of attorney is a document which says if I am unable to make healthcare decisions for whatever reason, I've been in a car accident, I had a fall at home, I had a stroke, whatever. But if I can't do that, then I'm going to appoint Carol to do that for me. She's my agent. It does not mean that if I can do it, that Carol and I are getting, that Carol can overrule me. So you don't have to worry about that. Some people might think, well, if I make this person my agent, maybe they'll have a different idea about it. No, cross that out of your mind. The healthcare power of attorney does not even kick in unless the grantor of the power has no ability to communicate. So then you're saying, okay, if that's, then I need someone to do that for me. And you can have alternate agents as well. The living will declaration is your chance this is the end of life document. This is the document that addresses the situation when you are at the end of your days. And it gives you the opportunity to say to your loved ones and family that it's okay to let me die peacefully and without prolonging my life with technology. Okay? That's kind of a short version of the living will declaration, but that is in essence what it does. So that there's also comfort here. The living will declaration doesn't kick in until a doctor has made a determination that you are at the end of your life, you're either terminally ill or in a permanent unconscious state, And if those things are true, then what you say in the document is, if those things are true, I'm all right with just don't put me on artificial life support, and if I'm on it because I got brought into the ER, if I'm on it, you can disconnect all that and just let me be. And so that's your opportunity. You don't have to do it. Nobody has to do it, but it's putting in writing. That's, I'm sure you see in your lives and the lives of your friends. Things that aren't in writing can frequently become very problematic. So this is your chance with those 3 documents: durable power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, living will declaration. So when you wrap those together with the estate planning documents like will, trust, bill of sale, deed to the trust, you now have a real good plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christy.
Well, hi everybody. My name's Christy Steffy, and I'm with the Catholic Foundation. And as Father said, what he might not know is that day that we met was my first week. I had just started. And I remember, you start something new and you're meeting so many people all at once. But what I remembered was the emerald of the diocese. So that stuck in my mind. And from the first time, that's how I always remember. But yeah, I think that might have even been my second day.
And your boss, Lauren Brown, is the president of the foundation. I refer to him as the $180 million man. Was probably very impressed that there you were on your second day and you sealed the deal. It helps. It helps.
So I live in Columbus. I live in Bexley with my husband and our 2 high school age daughters. I've lived in the Diocese of Columbus my whole life. I'm actually from a little town called Dover, Ohio. So it's the kind of the far east, far-flung part of the diocese where I
Dover's close to New Philadelphia.
Yes.
And Cambridge.
Yes.
If you're in Cambridge, you've left the diocese.
Right. And if you go up Interstate 77 and you get to Canton, you've left our diocese. So Dover's kind of like this, tip corner over there. But I grew up as a parishioner at St. Joseph Parish in Dover, where I received all of my sacraments except for marriage, which that was in German Village. And now I'm a St. Catherine parishioner. So my parents still live in Dover. And working for the foundation is actually, I say it's my second run at a career. I worked in the communications sector for over 20 years, and it might seem like, well, how did I end up at the foundation? And I think it's definitely the hand of God and the Holy Spirit, because it's only when you look back that you can kind of see where the path was leading. I had a great opportunity to we called it a pre-tirement, because I was too young to retire, but I had a great opportunity to reinvent and my career. And ending up at the foundation was just, honestly, what I can say is it was one of the best things that's ever happened. I have high school age daughters, and it's great to be able to have an example that I'm living of working for our Catholic faith and doing work that is alongside so many great organizations within our diocese. So the Catholic Foundation really exists to help parishes, schools, our social service organizations, and to promote vocations in our diocese. So I will almost say we're almost like, we're a resource. We're like the bank. The bank doesn't own your money, it's your money. The foundation doesn't own the assets. We hold them on behalf of the parishes. So this green, sorry, there's blue and green, so if you're color challenged, I'm sorry. This is the one that says, it's the one that has the big numbers at the bottom. So it's the green tree. These assets, these things that are listed here, this belongs to St. Mark Parish. these are things that the foundation holds on behalf of your parish here. So what is it that we do at the foundation? So I said we support we call them the 4 pillars, which are parish life, Catholic education and faith formation, vocations, and social services. So within that parish life heading, those are things like, obviously, the life within your parish. And if you think about the parish life cycle, these are things like the maintenance of our buildings, the maintenance of your actual building here. These kinds of things, the brick and mortar, and also some of the ministries that take place, and that's all kind of under that heading of parish life. Then the Catholic education and faith formation, those would be, again, some of the different programs that are provided for parishioners, for our young people, pre-Cana, all of those different ministries. That kind of falls under, and obviously our Catholic schools are under that. That is the biggest one that falls under that heading. And then vocations, that's just what it sounds like. Those are vocations to the priesthood and religious life.
Which includes the diaconate.
Yes.
And you all know how we have benefited from the diaconate in the last 3-4 months.
Thank you. Yes, that is very true.
Yes.
And then the last one is social services. Those would include things like your food pantry and the other food pantries, the different Catholic social services, the pregnancy support centers, these different organizations that support our community. So how do we do this? Well, essentially, we work with the parish staff to help people take what Jim just talked about, which is looking at planning. The whole theme here is about planning. Making sure that our parishes are sustained and are healthy going forward. There are different organizations that have done a really good job over a lot of years of making sure that people think about their organization when they're considering their plans for end of life. Universities are great about it. They're constantly getting people to, don't forget Ohio State, don't forget your college. And those are great things. The Humane Society, great organizations, hospice, all of these organizations, they're good organizations. What we haven't done as good of a job at, as Catholics, is making sure that people think to remember their faith. The fact that you're all sitting here today, I'm probably going to guess that you're here because you love St. Mark Parish. You have charity in your heart. You care enough to be here. When people are thinking about making those plans for what happens with all of these gifts that I've been entrusted with in my time on earth, what do I do with them and how do I leave them? It might be easy to maybe, I won't say forget, but not be thinking, where's the place where I sat in the pew weekly, where my family was nurtured and cared for during good times and in joyful times, where the sacraments happened. So the foundation exists to help people remember their parish and remember the different organizations that meant a lot to them during their time on earth. So what we do, you can do it, you could leave a gift and do it through a bank. You could do that. You could say, I want St. Mark to receive X number of dollars upon my passing, or a certain percentage, and it goes immediately to the parish. What we do is we will help you set up or contribute to something like the endowment fund that has been set up for the parish. And the way that endowment funds work, and I'm not going to go into a lot of specifics, but there's a corpus of money that is in there, and that big chunk of money is invested. And I should say, what makes us different is we invest it. Nothing is out of alignment with Catholic values and teaching. So we're never going to invest in something like life-ending technologies, embryonic stem cell research, weapons of mass destruction, these sorts of things. That's never going to happen. We steward the money appropriately and in a very faith-filled, conscious way. But that money grows, and then every year, 5% of the balance comes back to St. Mark Parish every year, forever. So it's really designed to last into perpetuity. So there's an example, it's a fictional person, her name is Molly. Molly is a typical parishioner. Every Sunday, she puts $20 in the collection basket for her whole life. At the end of Molly's life, she decides she'd like to leave $20,000 to the parish in an endowment. What Molly has done, you do the math, $20,000, 5% every year, it's like Molly never left the pew. It's $20, pretty close, to every week. So the point is, and I think Jim will say this too, I mean, it's very easy to say, well, I don't have an estate. Estates are those are for those other people. But the reality is that we all have something. We all have something. It's whether it's a house that we own, whether it's a bank account, an IRA, a 401k, something. We all have an estate. And just like we remember our parish weekly, thinking about when I'm no longer here, when I'm in heaven, God willing, what happens with what's left? What happens with what didn't get used? And that's where you have the opportunity to continue that. I think there's a great little quote. It's by Warren Buffett, and he says, "I sit in the shade today because somebody planted a tree before me. I didn't plant the tree, but I benefit from it." And these numbers that are on here, you can see a lot of people gave a lot of thought over a lot of years. Down here at the bottom of this, there's a total parish endowment gifts. So that's the total amount of money that's been given to the existing endowment funds. So $962,000 has been given. That's a lot. The great part of it is the balance is over $1 million. 1,039,000. The best part of the story, though, is when you look at the blue sheet. So this shows how much your beloved parish has benefited from that generosity. So you can see, I just took the last 5 years of impact. So you can see what that total is. Over the course of having endowments with the foundation, St. Mark has benefited $818,000. And that's not much, that doesn't grow on trees. There's not a magic thing that we're doing. We're not doing something magical. I should also mention, the foundation is, we say we are canonically aligned, but civilly separate from the diocese. So we are not a branch of the diocesan office. We are catty-cornered down there, downtown. We're on Broad Street. We're in the old Wendy's building. But we are not a division of the diocese. We are a separate organization, but we never do anything that is out of alignment with them. So we're canonically aligned, we're civilly separate. So all of those assets, we hold them separately. So in addition to the foundation's endowments that we hold for St. Mark, we also have funds where people have just said, I want to do something. I don't know what it might look like. I want it to be for the best benefit in the diocese. So we have a pool of money that we call it's unrestricted, or maybe it's restricted. It has to be for faith formation, or it has to be for maintaining churches. So every year there's that money, that 5% that comes off, and parishes can apply for grants, and then we award grants out of that. And so there have been a lot of grants that have come to St. Mark. In 2020, I know it will be shocking to know, but there was this crazy thing called a pandemic that we never expected. And immediately, within the first week and a half, we saw and anticipated there was going to be a great need, particularly for the food pantries throughout the diocese. So we created a fund, and we called it the Catholic Emergency Response Fund. And it was humbling. It was humbling to see the generosity of people at that crazy time. I mean, it's really wild to think here we are a year later, a little over a year later, and we're sitting in a room, and we took these off. It's great. But so many people stepped up and gave money that we were able to give lots of grants. I know that, so I put that here under 2020, $18,000 came to the food pantry here at St. Mark to help serve people who needed support during that really uncertain time. In the previous year, in 2019, there were 2 grants that St. Mark received. This is above and beyond the regular money that comes out of the endowments. One was a grant for $30,000 that was for the new sound system that was designed for your worship space. So it had microphones for the soloists and for Father, the wireless microphones. I think you probably all remember. That was a great thing that we were really happy to be able to help with. Along with that, there was a grant for the Missionaries to the Family Initiative. I think that's still going to be an ongoing. It is an ongoing.
It is
Ongoing effort to support the parish. And then a little further back in 2018, there was a grant to correct some boiler leaks. And then I just listed some other ones down below that going back to 2004. The reason I think it's really important to show that is it's not everybody's aware. I'm sure, obviously Father knows, the parish office knows, but I'm going to guess that in a lot of parishes, not everybody is aware of what that impact is. And that's fine, but that's why we're here. We're here to learn. That it all happens because a lot of people fought over a lot of period of time. So what is it that the foundation does? So my job as a development officer is I sit down with people and talk about what's your passion and what is it that you want to do, and then try to match up what you'd like to do and what is that area. Maybe it's a particular ministry, maybe it's just supporting the parish, whatever it is, but helping to provide some opportunities to do that, and then obviously working with someone like Jim, Aranda, to help you name that maybe beneficiary designation. So in a trust or on a particular account that you hold, to say, upon my passing, I would like, X dollars or, X percent to go to my family and divide it up this way. And then I would like this piece to be directed to support St. Mark Parish. I mean, that's what we do. That's what I do. And I think as we go through life, the need to adjust a will or a trust changes because your life circumstances change. As a personal example, there are a number of endowments that support very specific needs. You have one that supports the general needs of the parish. You have the Snyder Tuition Endowment Fund that supports education. And then you've got the Youth Education and Activity Endowment Fund. And then you have some I've listed on here that they're established. One of them is Father's. He created an endowment fund, and it will be funded with a bequest upon his passing. That's what these are. So I list those there because I think it's good to see that these are people that you know. These are names that you recognize. But my personal story is, so I'm the oldest kiddo. My youngest sister is 18 years younger than me. And we had a sibling who passed away when I was a senior in high school. And that was a long time ago. So we, a year and a half ago, my sisters and I decided we were talking with my mom and dad, and my father just turned 80, And my parents have just been very fortunate. I think, you know, I was raised very conservatively. My mom, I would say, Mom, why don't you replace these old curtains in the living room? And she'd say, these old curtains are why you get to go to college, because I'm, you know, so frugal. And why don't you get some new towels, Mom? We don't need new towels. Yes, this is the house I grew up in. Well, now fast forward all these years, and they said, we have more money than we need, than we're going to need in our retirement. So she's talking about things like, you know, now we have to take money out of our IRA. We have to take these required minimum distributions. And she's like, we don't need them. So my sisters and I hatched this plan, and so we created an endowment fund in memory of our brother who passed away. And it supports and it benefits youth at my home parish in Dover. And so it provides some tuition assistance for a young kiddo for their family to be able to afford a Catholic education. And we surprised my parents with it at Christmas that year. We made my mom and dad cry, so we said, okay, that's a win. But what's been really nice is it gave them an opportunity to take some of those required minimum distributions and direct it to something that is really meaningful. And it's going to benefit a young person right there in the community that they know, and it's in Ben's name. It was a really special thing to be able to do. And you know, my hometown changed a lot. I think if you're from a small community, you can see how a community changes over time. I can say for my town where I grew up, Dover was when I was growing up, there was a very high concentration of Germans, Irish, and Italians. That's who we were. It was very much the same. Fast forward to now, and there is a very large population of folks who've moved from South America, and they've found a very welcoming community in Dover and New Philadelphia. And so now the parish school, it looks very different. There's a need for English as a second language instruction in the school. That didn't exist when I was there. So it's been very interesting to see this happen. And I know that my parents are very happy to be able to help some of these families who've just come to this country, who might not otherwise be able to afford a Catholic education. My parents aren't rich. They're very average people. They're lovely people. But it's one of those examples that it's real. These are real people. So it was just an opportunity to be able to help. And so those are the kinds of things that I will work with people to say, what is it? What's your thing? And it's really an honor to be able to talk with people and find out learn their story. It's a privilege to be able to be part of that planning, because if somebody has charity in their heart, there's a reason it's there. And so I get to work with that, and I think it's a great honor to be able to do that. So and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about the different types, an endowment fund versus a scholarship fund, with a charitable gift annuity, a life insurance. Those are all very unique to everyone's situation. But what I would say is that if you feel that pull and you're looking at doing your planning, your estate planning, it doesn't cost anything to have me come. I just sit and, I can sit down with you and have a very casual conversation with you, and very easy about what is it that you want to do. Reach out to me. I put a card in all of those things, all of the folders. That's what I'm here for. I'm here as a resource to help you, to help see where is that way. And sometimes I'm aware of things that just through conversation with Father, or just awareness of some other needs that might exist. So we help to match up the needs with people who have charity, and it's a win-win for everybody. I should also mention, how is it that the foundation is able to do this? So the reason that we're able to do it in our existence is Bishop Campbell, 30 years ago, 1985, he saw the need, and there were several...
Bishop Griffin.
Bishop Griffin, not Campbell. See, I didn't go back far enough. Yes, thank you, Father.
You're welcome.
There were some folks in the diocese that said they saw that this was going to be a need, kind of an emerging thing, and a need to create a foundation. And so they got together and created what is now the Catholic Foundation. And there were a number of people that kind of stepped up and put some seed money in. And over the course of these past years, we've grown to where we are now, which is we support all of the parishes in our diocese, so about a little over around 100 parishes. And over time, of course, you start really small, but then as the operations grow, you need a bigger space. And so we're in a beautiful space. If you've been downtown Columbus and you ever went to COSI, you probably went across the street to the Wendy's that used to be there. But when COSI closed, the Wendy's, their business just fell off. There was not, at that location, there wasn't any business. So it closed, so it sat vacant. So the foundation was looking for a home, and they looked at it, and the market price was $1.9 million, and they said, nope, that is out of our price range. So we're looking for a number of years for a location that would make sense, would be the right one. So fast forward a couple years, and the owners of that Wendy's property reached out and contacted the foundation and said, hey, this is still for sale. And they said, well, we can't afford it. And they said, well, we think you can. The bottom line is that the building itself was purchased for $1, so it was basically given to the foundation. But it needed a ton of work. So then began, where does the money come from for that? I wrote these numbers down. So the work on the building to make it a suitable office space, because it had been a Wendy's. Before that, it had been a steakhouse. Before that, it had been a car dealership. So it had gone through a couple of different iterations over time. So there was...
That's why it has the work bays on the back. I thought, why did Lauren Brown build these automotive work bays? Okay. Now I understand.
And you know that the part at the front that's kind of a rounded window, if you were to look inside, there's a big star-shaped emblem on the floor laid in the tile. That was where a car sat, and it was a showroom floor. So, and then it's kind of like an archaeological dig, because then behind that is a big, long, rectangular dugout area. It's where the salad bar was at Wendy's. So it's interesting. But there was this need of, how do we turn this into space that can do the work? And again, it's the Holy Spirit at work. There was a woman named Ruth Lang who passed away. Now, prior to her passing, no one knew Ruth Lang. Ruth Lang had been a school teacher in the Columbus Public School District. And she left almost to the dollar a bequest to the Catholic Foundation that paid for all of the renovation to the building. Now, if that is not God working his hand, I don't know what is. Because what was so interesting was this woman who lived a very quiet life as a school teacher leaves this very large bequest, and she also supported several other charities around town. But so the work was done to the foundation, and then there was another gentleman by the name of Ray Grosser, and he created an unrestricted operating fund, and that's what funds things like paying our taxes for the building, or keeping our lights on, the materials that I give to you, and I have charity in my heart, but I have to make enough money to be, so it pays for all of that. So that's how we're able to do it, because those things are all taken care of. There's nothing's coming out to cover things like salaries and crazy fees. And I think it's really important to mention that, because what I have found from my experience growing up in Dover, the farther you are away from downtown Columbus, you feel like, well, I'm giving money to Columbus. I'm just being honest. The reality is that we're not, we're just the holders of the treasure, and we're the investors of it for the benefit of the parishes. So it's important to know that any gifts that are given for the benefit of St. Mark, they're going to benefit St. Mark Parish. If you're giving to support the food pantry, it's going to support the food pantry. If you're giving to support your Catholic schools or vocations, that's where it's going to go. We ensure that that happens.
I would tag along to something you said earlier about the annual distribution is based on what the investment has earned.
Yes.
Typically, that's about 5%.
Mm-hmm.
I came here and was assigned as pastor in 2004. Shortly before I arrived, Charles W. Snyder died. And when I showed up, if I remember correctly, the endowment was $860,000. Wow, you know. And it was to benefit parents who were paying tuition in Catholic schools. Phil Kiger is the head of the grant committee, and he's the nephew of Charles W. Snyder. Charles W. Snyder was just a working guy. I don't remember whether he worked in a foundry or at Lancaster Glass or Anchor Hocking. Thank you. But he earned his money. He was married, had a son. Both his wife and his son apparently predeceased him. There we were. At the moment, we have 21 students in Catholic schools, 7 at St. Mary, 7 at St. Bernadette, and 7 at Fisher. I don't have the particulars in my head, but generally parishes in the diocese who have students in another school are paying something like $2,000 per student per year, in addition to which the parents pay whatever the tuition is. And that can be a considerable burden. There was one particular year in which the investment did not do well. I'm going to make a guess that was 2008 or something. Mm-hmm. And we got a letter that said, sorry, but the amount that is paid out from the Charles W. Snyder Endowment this year will be this much less than last year. Bishop Campbell was the one who sent the letter. We depend on that fund, which was about $38,000 to $40,000 a year. We depend on that to assist these parents so that they can keep their children in Catholic school. So I wrote a letter to Bishop Campbell. I said, Bishop, if we can't invade the principal in order to at least grant the same amount that we did last year, then it's likely that some of these parents will need to withdraw their children from Catholic schools. And if they do that, they likely won't be able or won't want to come back. We got the same amount. Bishop Campbell probably took it out of his golf fund or something. Noble. You know, there are those, you know, that's that, in all the years I've been here, that's that one rare exception to the fact, normally you don't want to do this, but it was clear to me, if you didn't do that, you would kind of betray the intention of assisting and keeping those students in Catholic school. And the bishop, when he got my letter, he understood the cause.
That's a really good point, Father. And, you know, we work to make sure that the wording in all of these endowments makes sense, and that it does care for those kinds of, I'll call them extenuating circumstances, because it was 2008, and if we all remember, that was from a finance perspective, that was not a good time. But it wasn't a good time for the investments. It was also not a good time for people personally, financially. So this was the time when we needed it more than ever. And so what's the intent, and what's really behind that? And that's where we usually have wording in those endowments to say, it's 5% all the time, unless there's a need, and here's the process for requesting in those rare circumstances where we need to, you know, consider giving more than the need out of the endowment. So Good point.
The bishop didn't do that without a little extra effort. He called me. You know, in all my years as a pastor, getting a call from the bishop is a rare day. Although Bishop Griffin would call each priest on his birthday and say happy birthday. But, you know, that one aside, Bishop Campbell called me and said, well, you know, Father, these are the rules. This is how it works. He said, if we're going to do that, if we're going to invade the principle, then you should really talk to, you know, either the grantor, I said he's deceased, or someone who's a relative who knows his mind. The bishop was probably thinking there's nobody still alive. I said, well, as a matter of fact, his nephew is the head of the Grand Committee. And I said, I showed him the letter before I mailed it to you. Okay. You have to do that. And, you know, otherwise, I agree, let's not invade the principle, because that's the future. That's the future of what that fund is intended to do.
So with that, I think we'll open up to Q&A. Any questions you want to hit Jim and I with? We're ready.
We're ready. Sure. We can do that.
Yes.
If the parish cannot afford to put any money in the foundation, are they still able to withdraw it? Do they have to first put the initial cost in?
We've made application for grants. We've also received grants that were unsolicited, such as the grants that came to the food pantry during the past year. But other grants, like the one for the sound system, there are different funds to which one can apply.
But I'm saying if a parish cannot afford to put money in to begin with, does not have people to put in endowments in that.
We
And they
received
still-
grants from funds that we had not put there.
Yeah.
So any parish is liable as long as they meet the requirements, they're okay.
That's a good question. So all of the parishes in our diocese have endowments today. They have something. Some are much smaller. People, you know, depending on where they are and maybe who the parishioners are, and also how much the pastor talks about this, because if you don't know about it, you're not hearing about it, you don't even know. Some parishes, obviously, it's much smaller. And then there are other parishes like your parish who is, I think, just done a great job of creating that awareness of the fact that it's here. This is something that we can do. And I should say, this is in no competition with weekly offertory. This is really looking at, not in the now. This is the, when I'm gone, what's left. And so it's not in competition with capital campaigns or the weekly offertory. We like to call it like it's a three-legged stool. You have your weekly offertory that supports the ongoing needs of the parish. We have capital campaigns when there's something, a big project, maybe paving of the parking lot, those sorts of things. And then the third leg of the stool is this planned giving and the future gifts, the endowments. And so a stool that has 3 legs is going to be much sturdier than one that has 2. It's, you know, we're really looking at the endowments are made to support whatever that need is forever. So as the parish changes, and I think it's no secret to all of us that, you know, we are, especially with our young people, we are really, to use the word crisis with the number of people who are leaving the faith, I don't think that's an exaggeration. And so how do we ensure that our parishes are still going to be a vibrant place for life and for training and faith formation? These are the things that will help that. You know, we all pray for many more people to come to Jesus and return to church or come to church. But how do we ensure that our parishes are healthy going forward? And this is one way. So anybody can give, and it's, you know, we say it's like no gift is too small for your parish, and you know, that's where everybody's circumstance is different. But yeah.
Gentleman in the back.
We used to live in Michigan, we lived up there for 21 years. We set up a will and power of attorney and so forth up there. Do we need to go back and set something up since we now live in Ohio?
So the question is,
Is Michigan a good state?
the question is, the couple lived in Michigan, sorry about that, no. And they have estate planning documents that they executed while they were residents of Michigan, but they have now moved to Ohio, where you are now living permanently.
Correct.
My best advice would be to, at the very minimum, you want those reviewed by an Ohio lawyer
Okay.
who is familiar with estate planning practice, because the fact is, every state has its differences. What you have may be fine and it may not. Additionally, let's just suppose hypothetically that what you have is fine. There may be other documents that you don't have that are kind of like available under Ohio law that you may want to take advantage of, so to speak. So my best advice is to have them reviewed.
Any others?
Any other questions? Okay, okay.
Well, thank you all, and thank you, Father, for having us come. I think these are great opportunities to learn about planning. I'm happy to be a part of it. And if anybody ever, I mean, obviously with Jim too, I mean, anybody who wants to talk after or reach out whenever.
Yeah. Just one closing thought. I thought it was interesting. Christy said when she meets with people, she sits down with them and she wants to know what their goals are. She wants to know what they're passionate about. What did I say when I sit down with a client? What's one of my first questions?
What are your goals?
What are your goals? So you can see that there's no reason not to have these kind of conversations and benefit yourselves, your loved ones, those that come after you, a whole community like St. Mark Parish. It's all good. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Father, for sponsoring Onward to Glory.
Thank you. Thank you.